Hi everyone and welcome to the 25 Tuesdays with WAY Instagram live series. I'm Kate, I'm one of WAY's volunteers and I'm running a mini-series to talk to people who are involved with WAY. It's called the Faces of WAY. Tonight I'm really excited to be able to talk to Emma. Emma's one of our wonderful ambassadors and she's going to be talking to me ahead of the National Day of Reflection, which is later in March, and talking about her reflections 2 years after being widowed to COVID. Some of you may have seen Emma before. She took part in the Talk Away with Kate series that we ran during lockdown, and about a year ago she was talking to Jess about her experiences. So we're going to be finding out what it's like a year on. She's going to be reflecting about that. So if anyone doesn't know what the National Day of Reflection is, I'm just checking my notes here to make sure I don't get it wrong. It's led by the end-of-life charity Marie Curie, and it's to reflect on the lives of the people who've died during the last 2 years and also support the millions of people who are grieving, whether from COVID or any cause. So it's a really important day for many people who are members of this charity WAY, as they're reflecting back on their loss, not just from COVID, but from many other illnesses, diseases, etc. We're going to be marking the day tomorrow, and we're inviting all WAY members and supporters to observe a minute's silence at midday, or if they prefer, to shine a light or display flowers in your window. So that's going to be at 8 PM tomorrow evening. So I'm going to add Emma in. I can see that she's here. My voice has almost come back, which is great. I've clicked the wrong button. Wait me a second.
Hi.
Hey, how are you? I'll let you adjust your camera. I know what it's like when you suddenly go onto double screen and it looks totally different. I lose half my chin at that point, usually. Thank you so much for coming and talking with me this evening. It's really lovely to have you here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Your voice is sounding better than when we caught up earlier over the week.
Day by day. I'm trying not to use it very often, which for people that know me quite well is quite difficult, but I'm doing my best. So I've just been telling everyone about the National Day of Reflection, and really, I suppose for you were here on Instagram with Widowed and Young a year ago,
yeah, talking
about your experiences of losing Charlie to COVID. And I suppose just to start off, for anyone that missed that story and didn't hear it, we would kind of love to know a bit about Charlie. What was he like? How did you meet him? And tell us a bit about him.
Yeah, of course. So I actually met him when I was 15, and then we got together at my 18th birthday party. So I'd known him for a very long time. He'd been part of my life forever, really. And I think he was just that sort of person that you wanted in your squad, is the best way to describe him. He was just so full of life, and I think that's why it just still feels so surreal that he's not here anymore. He was the board games, he was a singer, he was a part-time photographer, he worked full-time as well, but he had his fingers in so many pies. He was just always busy, but he was just so full of life. There was so much energy about him. He was just somebody that everybody wanted in their squad. That's the best way to describe him, right? He was one of life's good guys, and that's who he was. And I think he would have been absolutely staggered at the outpouring of love after he died. I think he would have just been so confused by it to a point, because I don't think you ever realise the impact you make on people's lives, but just the shock and the outpouring. And I think part of the shock came from the fact that it was COVID, and it made it real for a lot of people. I think all of a sudden this thing that was happening on the news just suddenly became really, really real. But that's who he was. He was just so full of life. He'd had cancer when he was 26, so he'd had testicular cancer. So he'd gone through a kind of life-changing experience then anyway. We found out afterwards that he wasn't actually expected to make it. So he'd gone through that experience anyway. And I think that just gave him this philosophy that life's too short. I'm just going to live my life. Copious times he was told, oh, you need to lose weight and you need to do this. And it was very much, well, I just like my food and I'm just going to do what I want and live my life. And, life's too short. And he really had that life's too short mentality and lived every day to the fullest. That's just who he was.
Well, I'm so glad. I always feel that as well. You know, I always think about and reflect on my own experience with my husband who passed away, and we really did, you know, make the most of every day. And
yeah,
I'm just so glad that we were able to do that, because it's, you know, their lives were cut short so suddenly and so, you know, so quickly. It's you know, it's so tragic. But so I guess, you know, it's almost 2 years ago, isn't it, for you that, you know, all of this sort of started, and what, you know, not only was the whole UK like made aware that the pandemic was going on, but you know, what happened when Charlie fell ill, you know, and he's what you know, what was going on in your house at that time?
Yeah, so it's actually 2 years ago today that he came down with a temperature. It was Mothering Sunday. He picked his moments, but he came down with his temperature on Mothering Sunday, and I saw the Facebook post he posted today, which was around, so I appear to be running a temperature, haven't been out in days, but I'm now in with a picture of Mickey Flanagan. Take care of yourselves and I'll see you on the other side. And that was, you know, he came down with a temperature, but even then I was like, a temperature? Like, where have you picked up a temperature from? I just didn't think it was. It wasn't because I was being complacent, and it wasn't because I was being arrogant. It was just, it was on the news. Like, how was this in my house? That's all I kept saying. And, you know, for us, he never had a cough. And that was all the guidance was very early on, was that you have that and you have a cough. And he didn't have a cough. So I clung to that. I really clung to that for much of the first week. And so he was ill at home for a week, and he got steadily worse and worse over the course of the week. But of course, back then they weren't testing, so there was no way of knowing if he actually had it. We spoke to 111 a couple of times, and because he just wasn't getting better, but they said, well, if he can get out of bed and he's not completely breathless, you know, it's not that, you've just got to ride it out. It does sound like you've got it, but you've got to ride it out. But nobody was testing him. Nobody wanted to test me. You know, we're just living with it. And as I say, he got worse and worse and worse. And then, so he came down with it on Mothering Sunday, and then the following Saturday and Sunday, he started to say that his taste had gone and things wasn't eating, which we now obviously know is a side effect and a symptom of it. And then he was stood in my bathroom shaving on the Sunday night at 9:30, and I said, do you want me to stay with you? And he said, no, I'll be fine. You go downstairs. Okay. And this is how rapidly it changed, because at 9:30 he was able to stand in my bathroom and shave. And then about 1 o'clock in the morning, I woke up. Now, this is where the dates come in again, because that was my 39th birthday. So 1 o'clock in the morning on my 39th birthday, I woke up and he had what I thought was a panic attack. And I'd been reading online that people are delusional in the night because they're awake so much during the day, and it's very stressful that they can't sleep at night. So again, I still didn't really panic at this point. And I put a Bruce Springsteen DVD on. I was like, just watch that, just calm down, that'll bring you down. And then about 3:30, he was just delusional. It was almost like he was trying to cough something out of him. It's the only way I can describe it. And even at that point, I just thought, I'll just ring Medoc. They've given us the number from 111. I'll just ring them and we'll see what happens. By the time I'd got downstairs, I thought, no, just ring a paramedic, ring 999. But my words to them was, I think he's having a panic attack. And they went through some questions, said, oh, by the way, 111 think he's got COVID. Well, why do they think that? So I explained, I said, but he's not got a cough. He's not got a cough. And so then it was utter carnage in my house, because no one's allowed in at this point as well. We were placed in lockdown. No one could come into the house. So I had to ring my mum at 3:30 in the morning to get her to speak to my daughter, because I couldn't look after my daughter and be upstairs with him and the paramedics. I just couldn't split myself. And no one, so my poor daughter was literally on the phone with carnage going on in the house, because there was no other way to look after her. And the paramedics came in, and whilst they were here, his pupils dilated and his lips went blue. And that was my first thought, that this isn't just a panic attack, something is going on. But even at that point, he then sat up and went, oh, I'm back now, can you sit me up? It's me, I'm here. And I was like, that's all he needed then, just a little bit of oxygen and fine. And so they took him out, and he walked down the stairs, which I'm convinced is the last thing he did for our daughter, because he didn't want her to see him being carried out of the house. And he walked downstairs and he got into the ambulance, and I was told to ring the hospital 2 hours later, which I did. And at that point, I learned he'd been ventilated and sedated and was in ITU. And it was the most surreal moment, because I was like, but he walked down the stairs. He came down the stairs. How can... And because I wasn't allowed to see him, there was this moment of, have they got the right person? And I know that probably sounds really stupid, but I just thought, he walked down the stairs and he's not got a cough. How can you possibly be talking about my husband being in ITU? And then he was in ITU for a further 3 weeks. We never went to the hospital, so we didn't physically see him. The last week he was in, we were able to Skype him every day.
You weren't allowed into the hospital even at that point, were you? I don't think.
No. And the first week I was able to ring in, so I would ring in when I woke up in the morning, and then I would ring before my daughter went to bed, so that she went to bed knowing how Daddy was. And then after the first week, they were getting busier and busier. So they said to me, well, we'll ring you with an update. So then my days were literally just waiting for a phone call. And there was get one because they were so busy. And I had to adopt the mantra that no news was good news. And that was all I could do to get myself through. And then the week before he died, I had a call from a consultant. And I think this was what made it so hard for everyone that was losing people during that time, was that there was no white in people's eyes. You couldn't see people's body language. And I had a call from a consultant on that Sunday before he died. And she said, has anyone told you to prepare for him to never come home? And I said, no. She said, well, I'm doing that now. And it was just that moment of, I haven't seen him. Like, how can you be saying never come home? I've not seen him. And I then had to go into my daughter and tell her. But again, no one's allowed in the house. And this is, I think, what people haven't really thought about across the pandemic is how isolated we were in our grief. Because I've taken that call, and then I have to go and say to my daughter, this is what the hospital have said. And I can remember saying to her, do you understand what I'm saying to you? And she said, yeah, you're saying Daddy might die, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, there's a very realistic chance that's going to happen now. And then we just sat there because no one could come in. No one could come and give me a hug or come in and go, right, let me cook you some dinner. I just then sat there with my daughter going, well, we've got this piece of news and there we go, we'll just get up tomorrow. And then the following day the hospital rang and they'd set up Skyping, so we were then able to Skype him every day for a week. And that was the first time I'd actually seen him since he'd walked out of the hospital, and since he'd walked out the door to the hospital, and he just looked like he was asleep. That's the only way I can describe it. He had a nice colour to him. So again, to be hearing he might never come home but he just looks like he's asleep and he's got a nice colour about him. And so we did that every day for a week. And then the following Sunday, which was the 19th of April, was when I got the call in the morning to say he's not going to come home. I don't actually know what they said to me. I can't remember. It was. And it was at that point they offered me the chance to go in to say goodbye. But the condition was, because we didn't know if I'd had it and we didn't know whether my daughter had it, the condition was I'd have had to isolate away from her for 7 days. So it was like that. There was no overthinking it. I just thought, well, I'm not coming in there, because I couldn't have her dad die and then me be in one house and her somewhere else for a week. It just wasn't, it was a decision. I had to make that decision there and then. And so then we did Skype him for a couple of hours. But they said, oh, you know, don't let on that you're saying goodbye, because you don't know how much he understands. And that was surreal as well, because I'm trying to say goodbye without saying goodbye. And so we were on the phone for a couple of hours, or about an hour. And then 2 hours after that was when I got the call to say he died. But even then, I didn't go to the hospital. I wasn't allowed to see him in a chapel of rest. He wasn't allowed to be dressed because it had been COVID. So there was all this going on, that I think the first time it really hit me that this was real was when the hearse pulled up outside my house and the funeral director walked to me, whenever you're ready, Mrs. Charlesworth. And I could feel my knees buckling, because at that point I just thought, that's my husband in there. But he walked in, you know, just over a month, this has happened to me.
And there's all of those really quite unique things that have happened to people that have lost their partners during COVID that have made this kind of traumatic event so much worse. and so much harder. I think, you know, the fact that you haven't been able to do what, you know, I might have take for granted, like be with him when he passed away. And I know that isn't an opportunity afforded to everyone that loses their partner, but you know, some people get that, and to see him in a chapel of rest, and to have a funeral with more than 10 people there, you know, it's just, it's so much, and I can only imagine it's such a lot more for you to have to process and deal with, you know, in your kind of bereavement and grief, isn't it, for you and your daughter?
Yeah, and I think for everyone, as you said at the start, you know, whether it's been a COVID grief or a COVID death or something else over the last 2 years, we've all had these experiences, because it's walking out of the crematorium and going, oh, I'll go home now. There's no celebration. There's no celebration of life. There's no hugging. You know, it took 3 months for someone other than my daughter to hug me. And that was only because we were then allowed to form support bubbles. So I formed one with my sister. So she hugged me. But that was it. And it was then I held his celebration of life on his birthday. So 15 months after he died. And people were hugging me. And it was the most alien thing in the world, because no one had done that. And I'd read some interesting studies about how hugging and physical contact is so important when you're grieving. None of us have had that. You know, none of us have had that supportive arm around you to say it's going to be all right.
Human nature, isn't it?
None
you know, for people to actually physically support each other when they need it, and you didn't get any of that.
No, and it was silly little things. It was, you know, everything was on lockdown. I couldn't suddenly say to my daughter, right, we're going to go shopping for the day. Let's just forget about all the stress, and we're just going to go and spend money. You know, I couldn't do that. That was shut. I couldn't order a takeaway. I had to just keep going. And, you know, to the point that an hour after he died, I can remember looking at her saying, right, I need to cook you dinner. Because the mother in me just kicked in to go, well, I've got to look after you. So, right, I'm going to cook you dinner. Because again, no one, and I've read books and where everyone's like, so then the family come in and they take over and they put the meals in the freezer and they do this. No one came into my house the day he died. In fact, I didn't ring people or tell people that he died for a good 5 hours, because it didn't matter. No one could do anything anyway. And so in my head, I thought, okay, well, I'll just wait till a lot of people have got kids. I'll just wait until all the kids have gone to bed, and then they can all process it and deal with it in the morning, and tell the children in the morning, because I thought, what does it matter? I'm not suddenly going to get a house full. I could tell them in a week. You know, it was really
weird. It's an incredibly
kind
kind thing for you to do, Emma, to think of everyone else when you're in such a difficult situation of your own.
But I think there's an element of, and I think a lot of us have experienced this, is that everything was so out of control that we've almost had to put our own little coping mechanisms to give us back a little bit of control. And I can remember waking up the day after he died at 6:30 in the morning and going downstairs and writing a list of people I needed to contact, like the banks and the insurances and da-da-da. And I was just sat at 6:30 writing this ridiculous list, because it was the only way I felt able to make sense and put myself back in control of what had happened to us. But it was weird, completely weird.
And I guess, you know, really for most of that first year after Charlie, you know, passed away, you were in that same scenario that everyone else was in, as in, you know, mostly in lockdown. And that must have, you know, meant that you were in that kind of limbo period time without normal interaction for that first year. So I guess, I know that when you spoke about it before, you hadn't had opportunity to do a lot of things that you know, people have to, you know, think about doing after they've lost their partner, or like, you know, going to an event by themselves without other people, you know, without their partner there, or you know, even your daughter going to school, because, you know, kids weren't at school, were they, for so long? So I suppose what has it been like in your second year, and how has that been, you know, reflecting back, I suppose, apt because it's this National Day of Reflection coming up later in March, you know, since you last spoke to us, how have things changed for you now that things have opened up more?
It's been really hard, and I think there is a perception that it gets easier with time. And I can remember a friend saying to me in the run up to the anniversary, right, you've got the last first, and then you know, then you've done all the firsts. And I can remember saying to him, I haven't. I said, I've not done parents' evening. I've not done a school run. I've not gone to the theatre. I've not been out for dinner. I've not done a family party. I've not done any of these normal things. And it's taken from this year onwards. And even, you know, the memorial service, there wasn't everybody there I wanted because I wasn't able to. And it's actually been incredibly difficult. I think this second year, oddly enough, I would say has been harder than the first year, because the reality is that he's not here. Yeah. You know, that first year we were in shock, but we were in shock in a bubble. We were in our own little world. No one, as I say, no one was coming in. We couldn't go out. I live in Kent, so we got put back into a third lockdown just before Christmas, before the rest of the country went back into a lockdown. So we were just in this little bubble, really, my daughter and I, just surviving. And that's what we did. For the first year, we had just survived. And every, you know, I look back now, I don't really remember it, if I'm honest. Right. I know I went to my sister's for that Christmas. I don't remember it. I look at photos, but I don't really remember it. And I think that was that. So I think coming out and the world opening up again, I think it's just been really difficult. You know, I will cry at a theatre all the time because it's a trigger. We took my daughter to see Hairspray last year, which was her last birthday present from us. It had been her 10th birthday present. So we should have gone in 2020 and we went towards the end of last year. And I can remember getting on the tube afterwards with my friends and I just burst into tears because that was it. That was our final present from us, gone. There was no link to him anymore. And all the while it was being rescheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled, there was still this little link to him there. And I just,
it was a present from both of you, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was the last present from both of us. It had said Mummy and Daddy on the present. And I stood on the tube and just burst into tears. And my friends, who are all just fabulous, they get out the tissues and they don't bat an eyelid, whereas, you know, Rebecca's over there going, oh God, Mum's at it again. But that was it. It was just that last link to him had gone. And I hadn't anticipated that. And I think that that's what has been so, so difficult. And of course, COVID is still ever present. There is no escape.
There's no escape from it, is there? It's just, you know, I was thinking about you and the other people that have been bereaved from COVID, because, you know, it's a topic of conversation with people that I interact with every single day. You know, someone has got it, or someone's talking about it, or we're talking about the figures and the stats are going up, and it's on everyone's kind of subconscious, isn't it? And I know how triggered I can feel when you know, that cancer research advert comes on the TV with the story and it shows someone having chemo, and I think, oh, you know, and in the pit of my stomach feeling. And for you and others to have to be surrounded by this all the time with everyone, and it's on the news, and I can only imagine how incredibly difficult that is. Still now, you know, this far on. I know it's an incredibly short time in a kind of grief terms, because, you know, we've got the rest of our lives, haven't we? But I mean, it feels like a long time that we've had to deal with this around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, just, I'm in a WhatsApp group with some of the Kent WAY members, and just before Christmas, everyone seemed to be getting ill, to the point I said to them, I'm going to have to mute notifications. I can't, and it was, there was a lot of talk about it, but I was like, I just need to escape from this. I can't escape from it anywhere. It's on the news. I just want to go away. And, you know, as I say, he went into ITU on my 39th birthday. I turned 40 last year. I had a lovely day, actually, oddly enough, on my 40th last year. It was the day after that people were allowed in gardens again, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and so friends came round and were brilliant. But it meant I couldn't have my party, and I'd been planning this party for years. I always knew what I was going to have. And I had that party on Saturday, just gone. But in the run up to it, people were pulling out because they were testing positive, or they had a cold, and even though they were tested negative, they didn't want to run the risk that there was a problem with the lateral flow, or because case number, and they've got things happening in a couple of weeks. They were, and I can remember almost being like this petulant child last week, sitting here going, well, that's it, it's going to ruin my birthday again, isn't it? That's now the third birthday in a row, it's going to ruin. And it just doesn't go away. And that's the problem. I just sit there now and I just want it gone now, because it's that permanent reminder, you know, you can't escape it anywhere. And that's really tough. And I think a lot of us that have lost to COVID really struggle with that, because it's ever present. You can't. And I think the other really difficult thing is when people sit there and say, oh, it's just a hoax, it's not real, the government have made this up. That's really difficult to hear, because you'd never hear somebody turn around and say cancer isn't real, or, you know, any other horrific disease that causes loss. But so when you sit there and you hear people saying, oh, the government have made this up and it's all a hoax, and, you know, there's no such thing as COVID, no, there is. There really is. And I think that is particularly difficult when you have lost to COVID as well, because you then feel like you're justifying, and that's really hard.
Yeah, and you really shouldn't have to do that, you know, because it's incredibly painful, and I can only imagine. It angers me a lot, so I can only imagine how angry it makes you feel, just to deal with that. I know that one of the ways that you've kind of helped to deal with your emotions and feelings and journey that you've been on in the last couple of years is you started writing a blog. It's called Life is a Roller Coaster, which is a great name. I mean, how for you has writing helped you process your grief and get through the last couple of years?
If you'd have told me 2 years ago I'd have done that, I'd have been very, very surprised, because I didn't write. I didn't. My late husband, he would write in birthday cards, and I would always say to him, you've got a better way with words than I have. So, you know, people said they'd never seen my handwriting until he died, because he would just write and do all the writing. And, you know, I made a really conscious decision early on that I was going to be quite open about what was happening, and I wasn't going to shy away from talking about what was happening to us, partly because we couldn't get any physical support, so the virtual support made the world of difference to me. And it was about a month after he died, and somebody said, you should write a blog, because what you're saying would help others. And I sort of laughed it off and just thought, no one's going to be interested in what I've got to say. And then I, as I say, I was very open on social and everything, and my posts were just getting longer and longer and longer. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute, Facebook or someone's going to come on to me. My word count is getting ridiculous. Cut me off. I'm going to be mid-sentence. And so I sat there and thought, but you know what, I'll do it. And a friend of mine kind of gave me that push that I really needed. And so I just thought, well, I'll do it. And I did it because I found writing cathartic, and it was purely, even when I launched it, I said, do you know, I just don't, if nobody reads it, it doesn't matter, because actually this is really helpful for me. You know, I will often do my writing before I go to bed, because things go around in my brain and I've got to get it out of my head and put it down on paper, and I'll sit and do a lot of writing before I go to bed. And I underestimated the power of writing, actually. And, you know, when you write something and then you read it back, you just think, okay, this is helping me make sense of actually what's going on in my head. And what I found really interesting, so I launched it last March, so the start of March 2021. And I've gone back and I've read posts that I've written over the course of the year. And you can actually see, hate to use the J word, but you can see the journey over the past year. You can see how my emotions have changed, or, you know, when I may have angry, I may have progressed. And it's really interesting for me to look back on it as well, to say, okay, well, this is what's happened to me over the year. But, you know, what I didn't expect was how much it's helped others. And that it's blown me away. You know, the comments I've had from people, you know, when people message you and say, I don't know if you want to hear this today, but you've helped a stranger. Oh. I find it's just so, because I just view it as my ramblings, and it's helping me, and it's quite cathartic for me to do the writing. So when you hear that, actually, and somebody who lost her husband just before Christmas said to me, "You've made me feel heard." She says, "I don't know if that's the right word, but you've made me feel heard, and thank you for just being so honest." And that is not something I anticipated. As I say, when I launched it last year, I said, well, if nobody reads it, at least it's helping me. So the fact it helps others, it just blows my mind.
It's incredible, and I'm glad it's so helpful to you and helping so many other people as well. I know that when we recently met in real life, which was amazing,
Yeah.
for the first time at Way's, we had Way's 25th anniversary celebrations in Cardiff, and actually you've written about that in your blog as well, and talking about that nervousness of walking into a room and meeting people, you know, full of strangers, people from this charity that you've been involved with for a couple of years by then. You know, how's Way helped you on a personal level? How's it benefited you?
Yeah, so I joined Way in the June, so about 2 months after he died, actually, and I was just a bit of a bystander for a while. I didn't really do very much. I would read posts on the Facebook group, but I didn't really do anything. And of course, when I joined, there was no physical events happening anyway. And then one Friday night, I decided to join a quiz just on Zoom that was being run by one of the Kent groups. And I can remember just feeling really nervous when I dialed in. And they'll probably, you know, tell me off for saying this, but they were all just normal when I dialed in, and I was like, oh, they're just normal people just doing this, and this is, we've got this horrific experience in common, but they're all just normal people. And then I've done that most Fridays, and it's become part of our lives now. And you know, my daughter sits there and she'll say to me, "Are you doing the Way quiz tonight?" And if I say, "Oh no, I'm feeling a bit tired," I think you should do it. I think it'll do you good to talk to people. You know, it's become part of our life. It really has. And I think, so that's been really helpful. I think through Way, I've also met people via social media. So Emma, who is one of the hosts later on in the series, we'd been speaking on social media. And I had a real wobble last year ahead of going to a festival. And I just didn't think I could do it. I was like, I can't do this. And my friends couldn't talk me around. And the day before I was pulling out. And Emma and she just happened to see my post and just message and was like, I've done it. But just having somebody that has done that say, you can do this, you can do it, made me think, all right, maybe I could. And I wouldn't have got that without Way. I wouldn't have had that. And my daughter and I probably wouldn't have gone to that festival because I had such a wobble the day before. And then Emma and I, in amongst 20,000 people, we did actually get to meet at the festival, which was brilliant. And then her and I met ahead of going to the 25th anniversary. And I think what was really nice about that event was being able to walk into a room. And I was nervous, you know, you're right. I put in the blog about this. There was like these butterflies in my stomach. And, you know, you say to people, I'm traveling across the country to go to Wales, to be in a room with people. I've only ever met one of them once. But I don't know them. I was like, God. And people kept saying to me, you're so brave. You're really brave to do that. I was like, am I? It was just that I knew I'd be okay. And actually, you know, it possibly sounds depressing to say, oh yeah, I've spent my weekend with a bunch of people that have all been widowed before they're 50. But actually you can walk in and you can talk about death, and you can talk about your experiences, and you can talk about how you found things, and it's like the most normal conversation in the world. And then you flip to talk about something else, and you can have these conversations and it's just part of normality, if you like, because you can talk about, oh, this is what happened to me. Oh yeah, isn't this food really nice? And you can flip, but everyone in that room gets it. And I think that that's what I found so powerful, is having people that really understand. You know, my family, my friends, everyone has tried to be so supportive, but they don't really get it because they've fortunately never gone through this.
Yeah. And
it's really difficult, and unless you've gone through something like this, to be able to properly support someone, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's an ease, isn't there, about being amongst other people where they've also had this thing happen that usually is such either it's the elephant in the room to me sometimes, you know, it's
Mm.
there's Kate, her husband died, or you know, oh, she's on her own, you know, visibly without my person. I always felt
Mm.
really on show, you know, when I was going to social events, whereas when I was meeting people from Way, I didn't have to say I was a widow. I didn't have to say my husband had died.
Mm.
Everyone just knew because I was there. And
Yeah.
sometimes I talk about it, and sometimes I wouldn't. You know, depending on how I felt. But I could talk about Johnny and talk about what it was like, and share that with people, because I think especially as you move forward and things, you know, change in your life, and or your world gets bigger, whatever analogy people want to use, but sometimes people find it a bit awkward when you're talking about your person, because they, you know, and I don't know whether it's, you know, us maybe thinking what they're thinking, or but I know of other members that people have said to them, you know, do you not think it's time that you sort of, you know, got on with things? But we all know that this is a forever thing. You know, we'll always be grieving
Mm.
our partner, because they always won't be here, and they always lost their
Yeah.
life far too soon. So yeah, I totally get it, and it's why I'm still involved with the charity 5 years on, not just as a volunteer,
Mm.
but personally. You know, I'm getting support from other members who help me through, you know, the tough times as well. I know many of our members have also got children, and they're in the same position as you, where they're solo parenting, and I totally take my hat
Mm.
off to you, because it is an incredibly tough job that you're left, you know, supporting your children and in their grief as well. And I know that, you know, as a byproduct of Way, Rebecca's also, you know, she's taken part in your quizzes as well, hasn't she? And she's got, you know, got out of it as good things out of it as well.
Yeah, and I think it's, as I say, she's the one who on a Friday nags me and she's like, you need to join it, or do you good? You've not, and especially, you know, if I've not seen another human being all week, she's just like, or an adult, she's like, you all do you good. And yeah, so I think, you know, last year, as I say, the Kent group have been running this quiz every Friday, and she sat and said, I want to run one. I think she's, I could be stand corrected, but I think she's the only child that's run one for the adults on a Friday night, and she ran it on Disney, and she sat there and she did all the questions and she planned it all herself because that's what she wanted to do. And then when we did the big picnic last year, because again, that was all done virtually, she ran a children's quiz for the big picnic, and she participated in the guess the number of sweets in the jar that was done, and she was so excited because she won that. She got the sweets right, so she got a big jar of sweets came her way, which was very exciting. But I think it reassures her to know that there are people out there that can help look after me, and I think that that is one of the real struggles for children who are watching their parents lose the other parent, or because she's had to step up, and you know, all of a sudden one half of the partnership that's been keeping her safe and protecting her has vanished. And
Yeah,
you know, for so much, and you know, it breaks my heart because for so much she's been the only one to see it. She's been the only one to see me breaking down. She's been the
yeah,
only one that can pick me up off the floor. And you know, he was 10 when he and you know, we're 2 years on now, but it's really difficult for her as well. So I think knowing that there's this group out there that can give support to me, which in turn helps me support her, is invaluable. But yeah, she's got involved, and she does do a very good Disney quiz actually.
well, I do hope that you both get opportunity to go to some of our family events that we've got on offer, because I know that other members that I've spoken to through the talk series have said how invaluable their children have found it, you know, mixing with some of the other children of members as well. And I know that's not our primary focus as a charity, you know, his, but like you said, if we can support the parents, then they can support their children, because we're
Yeah.
giving the parents what they need. So it's kind of that you're helping them in that sort of way. So I know that in the last 2 years, not only have you had support from WAY and have you gone to all of these quizzes every Friday, but actually you volunteered or stepped up to put yourself forward to be a WAY ambassador, and you were selected by the ambassador panel to be one of our ambassadors, which is amazing, because we've got these people that are happy to go out and talk about WAY, and but I suppose, what does it mean to you to be an ambassador, and and what do you do as an ambassador, just for anyone who's not aware of that role that we have?
Yeah, so again, it's not something I would have necessarily thought about doing, but for me, one of the biggest challenges I found was people not knowing what to say. And I think certainly there's still this element of the British stiff upper lip, and we don't tend to talk about death, and we don't tend to talk about bereavement, and we don't tend to talk about grief. And as you said, people get to the point where it's very much, oh, it's been a while, she'll be fine now. And actually, that's not quite how it works. So, as I said, I early on made the decision that I was going to be open, and so I was going to share our story, because I think, again, I've reached a point where I just like, it's just numbers. Everyone just keeps hearing numbers, but all of these numbers are people, and we need to stop people becoming just a statistic. There is loved ones who are suffering, and again, I sit there and I think I said to you when we caught up, if this had happened to somebody else, would I have known what to say to them? Would I have known where to point them and put them in the right direction? And so for me, one of the reasons I applied to be an ambassador was to try and help raise the profile of the charity, but also to kind of do what I could to help break that stigma and that taboo around death and bereavement and grief. Because let's face it, we're all going to go through it, whether it's a grandparent, or a spouse, or a parent, or a sibling, or even a pet. You all go through grief at some point, yet we don't talk about it. And so that was one of the reasons that I applied to be an ambassador, put in my big application, and as you say, I went before the panel and I was selected to be one. So what are some of the things that I've done? Social media, I've done podcasts, I've done some newspaper articles, I've done some magazine articles. I sit and represent WAY on the Lived Experience Advisory Forum, which is being run by the UK Commission on Bereavement. So they are trying to look at or are supported when they are bereaved, and they are taking the Lived Experience Advisory Forum takes views from people, and there's a whole range of us. It's not just young widows, a whole range of us, and we put forward views on what we've seen and our experiences and what we've noticed and what would have been beneficial for us, that can all get taken then back to the Commission on Bereavement. So I represent views of other widows on there as well. That
must be incredibly sort of. No, I was just going to say, so when you told me about that when we caught up earlier, like, I've reflected on it, and I was just thinking, wow, what? It's so amazing that we as a charity have a voice. We have you there, so thank you so much for being part of that, because I think that's brilliant. But also, it's quite like you were saying, there's lots of different people coming together. It must be quite a collection of opinions and voices, and it must feel quite powerful, really, because with all the people there with all their views and lived experiences, I just can imagine it's quite an emotional as well. I don't know.
Yeah, it is really emotional, and I think the thing that I've taken from it is actually there is no consistency. Have had really positive experiences in the nicest possible way, whereas others have literally got nothing. They've not even been given a leaflet. It's just, oh right, well, this has happened to you, and off you go. Whereas others have felt completely supported, and I think that that's one of the really interesting things as well. And even when I look at, we've got a subgroup within WAY for anyone who has lost to COVID or over the last couple of years, because it is a different experience, but even amongst us, there's no consistency with how we were all dealt with when our spouses died. And I think that is what is so interesting to be part of this, is to go, well, actually, if we can as a collective voice make a difference, then that's going to be so powerful, because actually we should all be supported, and there should be something in place to make sure that no one feels isolated and nobody feels alone and as though you're out there. You know, I came across WAY, nobody told me about WAY through a hospital or anything like that. It was a colleague of mine mentioned it on social media because she knew it had supported a friend of hers. But otherwise, would I have even thought to Google it? I don't know, because I wouldn't have necessarily imagined there'd be something out there. So, you know, is there something we can do to make sure that, you know, there's leaflets and funeral directors and just things like that. And so that's another part of my role as an ambassador.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more that can be done. We're always looking at different things we can do, and having the ambassador community to kind of drive some of that forward is so important. So yeah, huge thank you from me for stepping up and being an ambassador. We're really lucky to have you, and I'm super proud that you're part of this board and able to kind of give all of the views of the young widows and obviously share your experiences as well. I know you mentioned that you've done some podcasts, and I guess I just wanted to talk a bit about that. One of them that you did, I'm just checking the name of it here because I've got my notes and it's not printed out very well. The Empower podcast that you set up for PwC. Yeah. And I guess it was a bit about why it's important for people to feel empowered to talk about taboo topics like grief. So you've said, you know, people don't talk about death and bereavement. So tell us a bit about that podcast.
Yeah, that was something I set up at work, and I'm normally behind the scenes. I normally get inviting guests in. So this one was me talking about my experience, and again, it just comes back to actually we should all feel empowered to talk about this. You know, it's not something, we haven't done anything wrong, and I think that's it. You know, I am my own worst critic. I'll openly admit that. And even I at times am like, it's 2 years now, come on, a little bit. And then other people will say to me, you're still so early on your journey. I'm like, am I? But it's been years. But and that was one of the really interesting things in Cardiff, was people saying, oh, so you're relatively new to this. And I'm like, but it's been 2 years. Surely relatively new is a month. And I think that's it. And actually, again, it's all part of that. And one of the reasons that I did that podcast, which, as I say, it was slightly terrifying to be on the other side of it rather than behind the scenes, was just to make it, just to talk about it and to just make it okay to talk about what you're going through. And actually, I think that's the only way that the taboo around death and bereavement will ever get broken, is if we do think, well, actually, we can talk about it, and it is okay to say, sure, I'm really struggling and really hard. And I think that's the lesson that I've definitely learned, is that there is no logic to grief. I have not found any logic to it whatsoever. You know, there's this perception that grief is linear, and it's not. It's just like one big bag of that's just
one big scribbly mess, isn't it, really?
and I think certainly for me, I think I almost had some complicated grief because of just feeling the need to keep going, because of how shut down everything was. And there was an element of, okay, well, I just need to give us some sense of normality, so I'm going to do all I can to keep my life normal. And, you know, I've been working and doing what I can for my daughter and everything. And I think it's probably only in the last 6 months that it's really actually hit me what's happened. And as the world has opened up. But again, when you think about people's perception, which is 18 months in now, she's learned to live with this. And in a way I am learning to live with it. I'm learning to live around it. But also yeah, I think for a lot of us over the last couple of years that have lost, because we were basically locked down for a year, the opening up and the normality is when the grief has really hit, because that's when, as you said, when you start to do what you might have done before for the first time without them, and that's when the grief hit slightly later.
I think it emphasises the absence, doesn't it? Because you're doing things where they would have been there, so you're going back into what would have been your normality to a certain extent, and it's not the same, and it's that stark contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know, he will always be a part of my life. You know, as I say, I had my party at the weekend. I had a picture of him and I in 80s fancy dress that went on the bar. So he was part of it. He was there, and I've got a bench for him. And I took some of the balloons. I'd got 80s balloons, and I took those and I put those on the memorial bench en route to the party. We're all in 80s fancy dress. My daughter was hideously embarrassed that I'd made her get out of the car in the 80s fancy dress, but she was like, but we did it, and we put the balloons on the memorial bench, and we just sat there for a minute on the way to the party, because he's still part of it. He will always be a part of my life. That grief won't go away, and as I say, I'm learning to live around my grief, but it won't ever go. I've lost a massive part of my life.
Definitely. So I suppose, just as we're coming back to thinking about this kind of National Day reflection, I'd love to hear, you know, if you have any advice to share for other people that were also bereaved during the pandemic.
I think, and probably as much advice to other people is probably just advice to myself as well, really, but it's around being kind to yourself, because and whenever you lose someone, it's horrific circumstances, don't get me wrong, but we didn't lose in normal circumstances. There was so much else that we had to contend with in amongst everything else, that it's just remembering to breathe. It's remembering to be kind to yourself, and actually to ask for help when you need it. And as I say, I think a lot of us spent a year, 18 months in some kind of suspended reality. So it is okay that now it's hard. And saying this as much as a reminder to me as to anybody else, but it is okay that it's hard, and it is okay to still ask for help, and to reflect on actually the enormity of what's happened. And you know, when you look at the amount of children who are now growing up without a parent, and you know, this is going to be a long lasting thing. We're not going to suddenly forget about it. So take tomorrow to pause, take tomorrow just to think about the enormity of what's happened, and breathe, I think. And
definitely.
What I plan on doing.
That's great advice, and I think it's really crucial for anyone who's in our situation, like you said, to be kind to themselves, and absolutely definitely doesn't matter how many weeks, months, years it's been, but allow yourself to you know, have those bad days if you have them, and get the support that you need. It's absolutely crucial. What do you have plans? You know, what will you be doing on the National Day of Reflection, and how will you be remembering Charlie on that day?
So I will probably go up to his memorial bench. I will probably do the minute silence up on his bench. The local funeral director has arranged a memorial service to all those who've lost to COVID tomorrow evening. So we're going to that. And then I actually found this beautiful candle holder that is yellow and has got hearts cut out. And I don't know if you can see, but the yellow heart has become a symbol of COVID. And that candle holder, actually, when you put a little candle in it, it just projects yellow hearts around the room. So that's what we'll be at 8 o'clock tomorrow. And it will be thinking about him. It's, you know, as I say, today's 2 years since he came down with his temperature, so it was the day before lockdown, so the timing is always very pertinent to me as well. And then my birthday next week, so we're in for, you know, a rough couple of days, but it is just thinking about it, and just remembering, really.
Well, obviously I be thinking of you, especially Emma, you know, through these next few difficult days and weeks as you go through all those anniversaries. And I know many of our members have them where they just stack up one after the other, and it is really difficult. And I myself, today is 5 years since my husband's cremation. It's like you know, there are those dates, and they do sort of sometimes stick in your brain. But I know for you, they're dates like Mother's Day as well. And your birthday. They're not dates that you can put to one side because they're always so prominent. So we'll be thinking of you. Thank you so much for coming and talking to me and sharing your experiences, and for all that you do for WAY. Thank you very much. I feel like I'm losing my voice again. I'm just going to have a sip of water before I carry on. But so for everyone that's listening, we are running this series over 25 weeks. So we have 25 of these sessions. They're not all being run by me, but the first 6 are part of the Face of WAY. Do remember to join us tomorrow, please, for, you know, if you're able to, a minute silence at noon, to think about everybody who, you know, has lost someone in the last couple of years, especially, and for everyone that's grieving, like Emma and Rebecca, after losing their Charlie. For anyone who's joined us late, don't worry, this will be on Instagram videos, and so you can watch the interview later. And next week, I'm excited that we're going to be talking to one of WAY's new recruits. So it hasn't been announced yet, so I'm under some kind of embargo of what I can say. But we're going to be talking to a brand new community fundraiser about her hopes and dreams for this exciting new role, and how she's going to be supporting this fantastic charity going forward. So it's great. Thanks again, Emma. It's been lovely to speak to you. And I'll be thinking of you this week. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, Emma. Bye.